Hey guys, this is Smithy. Welcome to my channel. Today's video is a very special one. We're going to talk about all my pastel palettes. These are like the top of the top, creme of the creme palettes that I have in my collection, which are more pastel leaning. I have a mix of like pastel and neons also thrown in here. But if you guys are ready to see which are like the top pastel palettes from my collection, then please keep on watching. Okay, let's start off with the but obvious and the newest palette from Glaminatrix Cosmetics, and this is Pretty in Pastels palette. From the ombre packaging, from the way it is been like defined in the palette, it's absolutely amazing. I love the addition of the deeper tones in the palette. That's what makes a pastel palette wearable for me, how it grounds a look. I feel like I need some kind of a deeper shades to ground any eye look, especially on my skin tone. I feel like I definitely need that depth. And this palette has it so very nicely curated. This is not the palette that I'm wearing. I'll get to it when I get to it. But this is such an amazing palette. Again, this palette has pastels, has pastel leaning grungy tones, but also like deeper tones, and it complements the two shimmer rows that are there in the top row. These are not like shifty by any means. They're very elegant, like sparkly shades, but they're very, very finely milled. So it has like that whisper of sparkliness all throughout your eyelid, and that's what I love about this palette. So this is definitely one of my favorite picks for pastel palettes. The next palette is from Adept Cosmetics, and this is the Element 115 palette. Now this, I feel like it's a predominantly a shimmer heavy palette, but it has those pops of pastels, but these are like punchy pastels. Like you definitely can get pastel look out of it, but all the shimmers that are in this palette are also like pastel leaning. That's why I wanted to recommend this palette also. But also to deepen these pastel looks, you have deeper shades in the palette, which I absolutely love. Again, if you are a purple lover like me, you are absolutely gonna love this. This palette also doesn't have a lot of shifty shades. It does have a few shifty shades in this palette, but they're very elegant. They're very beautiful on the eyes. If you like a jewel tone, pastel tone eye, you would absolutely love this too, especially if you're a purple wearer. Okay, let's get an oldie but a goodie. This is a discontinued palette, but I didn't want to like not include this because I feel like if you are not into indie brands and you want like mainstream palette to go into that pastel route but more elegant route, Huda Beauty's Mercury Retrograde palette will have you covered. I love the tones that are inside this palette. I love that you can go more like peachy, you can go more purpley, pinky, this minty green shade which can more pastel lean. It's really, really pretty. Again, this has some deeper shades to ground the look together. This is such a beautiful, elegant palette. I really, really love everything about this palette. I've absolutely loved traveling with this too. So I definitely wanted to give this a shout out. If you have the Mercury Retrograde palette, you'll absolutely love it in the spring season. Now next, let's talk about the newest Gourmande Girls palette, which I have absolutely loved. I've ranked all my Gourmande Girls palettes in my channel before, and this ranked very, very high up there. I'll not spoil it for you guys. I'll link it in the icons above, but I'm talking about the Nueva Vida palette, which was in collaboration with Steph's Beauty Stash. This is spring in a palette. Like, it is such a beautiful palette. It has some beautiful pastel tones as well as neons. You can see those neon shades popping out at you, but also has like that pastel tones included in it. I love the inclusion of deeper tones to ground the look together. And this, where is that? This green is what I'm wearing on my inner third of the eyelid. Really, really love this palette so very much. I feel like this definitely gave a unique twist to my collection, and I cannot say that with every palette that I own. And this is just beautiful, absolutely beautiful. I don't think you'll be disappointed if you purchase this palette. I do have a code with Gourmande Girls, which is Smithy Sony, to save you 10% off. If you use it, do use my code to save some money. I do have a code with Glaminatrix as well as Adept Cosmetics too. Again, Smithy Sony, to save you 10% off. All my codes are there in the description box below if you're ever wondering. Let's talk about another matte palette. If you're not into shimmers, if you are into like the greens and the purples for like a pastel-y look, Sugar Drizzle's the matte palette. The quality of this palette is just amazing, amazing. You need to love the mattes again to love this palette, and this is heavy on purples. Okay, heavy on purples and less on like more greens and mints. But if you love a purple palette and a pops of here and there of like mints and lavenders, you will love it. I definitely wanted to recommend because I've gotten so many amazing pastel-y looks also using this palette. So definitely wanted to recommend this too. Let's talk about It's Bel Cosmetics. I don't know if it is available or not, but the Cool Summer palette has beautiful pops of pastels and the shimmers are just stunning. Like you can see, I love this palette. Like if you are going for like 2 or 3 shadows in your eye look, you will absolutely love it. Like I love these shimmers so very much. You can see the dip going in. It's so very beautiful. And these like minty shades, this is not more pastel leaning, but it complements with the shimmers that are included in this. Really, really pretty. So pretty. I definitely wanted to give this a shout out too. I love this palette. They a lot of times go on a discount. So if you've not snagged this and if you're eyeing this, I would definitely say yes to it. Okay, now next let's move into Simply Posh Cosmetics palette. I feel like Fairytale's Fairies palette, if you love pastel tones, you are absolutely gonna love it. I love the pastels that are included in this for a pop. I'm not a big pastel wearer, but I definitely love to use these as like a pop in the inner corner or like in the lower lash line. I love to wear those like that, and I love that they have complementary deeper tones here in the last row and complementary like duochromes in the middle row. If you can get a hands of this palette in the newer formula, I would highly recommend it. Mine has a little bit of like hard panning going on in this because mine is not like a newer formula, but I still love this palette really much. Like I love it. Okay, let's talk about Ladybug Glow, the newest palette from them, the Criatura palette. This also, you cannot call it like a pastel palette, but the looks that come out of this palette is more like pastel neon leaning. And I love the quality of this palette too. I really love. I love this minty shade, and I love the deeper tones that were included in this palette, and the shimmers are just outstanding. They've always been outstanding for their shimmer formula, but they're definitely improving in their matte formula too. Again, they have neons up in the palette too, but I love these tones together. So definitely would recommend, if you have this palette in your collection, bring it out this spring season, you will absolutely love it. The next palette that I'm going to talk about is Vicks Beauty's Tea Time palette. This also is such an adorable palette, not pastel leaning, but more neon leaning. But again, it's such a unique tone to the palette. I really love it. You definitely can get that vibes the way you are applying it with the brush. If you use like a loose fluffy brush, you would absolutely get that pastel-y kind of look. But you can also go deep and dark with those like deeper shimmers in the palette. I love to customize this palette with my Lovesick palette and even the Scissor Hands 2 palette and make it like my own custom palette. I really love it. I actually had to put it back just because I had my Lovesick palette all customized. But this is how it looks. But you can see like this can be a beautiful pastel. This amazing on the eyelid. And yeah, I love it. Absolutely love it. Even if you've not seen like Scissor Hands 2 palette, this has some beautiful baby blues, sagey greens. Yeah, I love Vicks Beauty's formula if you do not know. But I definitely wanted to shout out that Tea Time palette. If you like a color story from Vicks Beauty, I would say give it a try and see, because I feel like they do quality eyeshadows at such a reasonable price. I absolutely love it. The next palette that I want to talk about is the Glaminatrix Cosmetics Rich Romantic palette. Now, I feel like this palette has beautiful pastel-y tones. You have like those pinks, the corals, the purples, and to ground or everything together, you have like deeper tones too. And the shadows, like the shimmers, are just breathtaking. I definitely wanted to recommend this as this is like one of my most loved palettes in my collection. I love this so very much. This stays right on my vanity all the time. I really love this. I wear it to office often. I feel like this is like a wearable pastel palette in my collection. Now let's move on to the next palette. Absolutely saved my best two for the last. The one that I'm wearing on my eyes is the Sugar and the Grunge palette from Bel Cosmetics. I absolutely love this palette. you can see like these pastel tones with those grungy deeper tones. Beautiful. And the shimmers are also absolutely outstanding. I do have a look with this palette on my channel. I'll link it in the icons above. It will be like this look, but I tapped that Gourmande Girls Nueva Vida palette on top of this. But it's such an amazing palette. The quality of Blend Money palettes is just untouched. I really love their mattes. Especially their mattes definitely have my heart. Like I feel like there are very few indie brands in this community that do mattes so well. They excel in shimmer shadows and multichromes. We all know that. But Blend Bunny mattes are just amazing. Along with the next brand that I'm going to talk about, I feel like they do mattes so beautifully. So the last palette that I want to recommend, I feel like this is such an amazing palette, is the Ensley Cosmetics Lands of Enchantment Palette. This is a stunning pastel palette. If you want one pastel palette in your collection, I feel like this is the way to go. I love everything about this palette. You have greens, you have blues, you have purples. You have everything that you need in this palette with amazing shimmers, holochromes, multichromes. The mattes are just outstanding and breathtaking. I do not want Ensley to venture out anywhere else. Like I love the quality of their shimmers and matte shadows that they have captured is just outstanding. Do not play with it because I love the formula. Like I mean every single word of it. I'm not a big pastel person, but if I am dipping into that pastel person, I 90% of the time would be dipping into these two palettes. I love everything about this palette. Cannot recommend this enough. I do have a code with Ensley Cosmetics. It's Smithy Sony to save you 10% off. And from the packaging to the shades to the shimmers, everything inside this palette is just beautiful and breathtaking. You will not be disappointed if you try Ensley Cosmetics. That's my guarantee. And that's all for today, guys. I really wanted to shout out the best palettes from my collection so that if you do have them in your collection, get it out and play with it and you'll absolutely love it again. And if you were eyeing one or two pastel palettes to buy, then I feel like this is just the creme of the creme. That's all for today, guys. If you did like this video, you know what to do. Do give it a thumbs up and also subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And ring that notification bell so that you're notified every time that I post next. I generally upload 3 videos every single week, every Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays at 9 AM Eastern Standard Time. Until next time, I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye, guys.